Duksaja Sivayaiva Gatim Tadiyam Yatibir Durapan Shemam Sakachid Yuyudana Aste Yafalguna Labda Danurahasya Libinja Saduk Saja Sivayaiva Gatim Tadiyam Yatibir Durapam
Shemam Sakachit Yudhana Aste
Kshemam Sakachit Yuyudana Aste
Yapalguna Labdadinurahasya
Yafalguna Labda Danurahasya
Lebenja Sadhok Saja Sevayaiva
Libinja Sadhuk Saja Sevayaiva
Adim Tadiyam Yatibibdurapam
Gatim Dadiyam Yatibir Durapam Kshemam Sakachit Yuyudana Aste
Ya Falguna Labda Danurahasya
Yapalguna Labda Danurahasya
Lebhinja Sadokshaja Sevayaiva
Libinja Sadhuk Saja Sevayaiva
Gating Tadiyang Yati Birdurapam
Yam Gati Bir Durapam
Kshemam Sakachi Yudana Aste
Sakachit Yuyudana Aste
Ya Falguna Labda Danu Rahasya
Yapalguna Labda Danurahasya
Lebhe Jasad Hokshaja Sevayaiva
Oksaja Sevayaiva
Gatim Tadiyam Yati Birdurapam
Yam Gati Bir Durapam
Shemam Sakachit Yudana Aste
Nam Sakachit Yuyudana Aste
Yapalguna Labdadanurahasya
Yapalguna Labda Yathasya
Levenja Sadhokshaja Sevayaiva
Sevayaiva
Gatim Tadiyam Yati Birdurapam
Kshemam Sakachid Yuyudhana Aste
Kachit Yuyudana Aste
Yapalguna Labda Dhanurahasya
Labda Yathasya
Lebhe Anja Sadhokshaja Sevayaiva
Oksaja Sevayaiva
Gatim Tadiyam Yati Durapam
Zadiyam Yati Bir Durapam
Shemam Sakachid Yuyudana Aste
Shemam Sakachit Yuyudana Aste
Yapaguna Labda Danurahasya
Yafalguna Labda Danurahasya
Lebe Injasadho Shaja Sevayaiva
Ebenja Sadhok Saja Sevayaiva
Gatim Tadiyam Yatabir Durapam
Gatim Tadiyam Yati Bir Durapam
Kshemam
Kshemam Sakachit Yudhana Aste
Kshemam Sakachit Yuyudana Aste
Yafalguna Labda Danurasya
Yafalguna Labda Danurahasya
Libhinja Sadhok Shaja Sevayaiva
Libinja Sadhok Shaja Sevayaiva
Gatim tadiyam yati vidurapam.
Gatim tadiyam yati birdurapam.
Kshemam sakachit yudhana aste.
Kshemam sakachid yuyudanaste.
Yapalguna labdha tanurahasya.
Falgunalam dadanurahasya.
Lebhenjasa dokshaja sevayaiva.
Livinja sadhuksaja sevayaiva.
Gatim tadiyam yati birdurapam.
Gatim tadiyam yati birdurapam. Shemam, all good. Saha, he. Kachit, whether. Yuyudanaha, satyaki. Aste, is there. Yaha, one who. Falgunat, from Arjuna. Labdha, has achieved. Danu rahasyaha, one who understands the intricacies of military art. Lebhe, also achieved. Anjasa, summarily. Adhokshaja, of the transcendence. Sevaya, by service. Eva, certainly. Gatim, destination. Tadiyam, transcendental. Yatibihi, by great renouncers. Durapam, very difficult to achieve. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. O Uddhava, does Yuyudana fare well? He learned the intricacies of the military art from Arjuna and attained the transcendental destination, which is very difficult to reach even for great renouncers. Purport. The destination of transcendence is to become the personal associate of the personality of Godhead, who is known as Adhokshaja. He who is beyond the reach of the senses. The renouncers of the world, the sannyasis, give up all worldly connections, namely family, wife, children, friends, home, wealth, everything, to attain the transcendental bliss of Brahman happiness. But Adhokshaja happiness is beyond Brahman happiness. The empiric philosophers enjoy a transcendental quality of bliss by philosophical speculation on the supreme truth, but beyond that pleasure is the pleasure enjoyed by Brahman in his eternal form of the personality of Godhead. Brahman bliss is enjoyed by living entities after liberation from material bondage. But Parabrahman, the personality of Godhead, enjoys eternally a bliss of his own potency, which is called the Hladini potency. The empiric philosopher who studies Brahman by negation of the external features has not yet learned the quality of the Hladini potency of Brahman. Out of many potencies of the Omnipotent, there are three features of his internal potency, namely Samvit, Sandini, and Hladini. And in spite of their strict adherence to the principles of Yama, Niyama, Asana, Dhyana, Dharana, and Pranayam, the great yogis and jnanis are unable to enter into the internal potency of the Lord. This internal potency is, however, easily realized by the devotees of the Lord by dint of devotional service. Yuyudana achieved this stage of life just as he achieved expert knowledge in military science from Arjuna. Thus his life was successful to the fullest extent from both the material and spiritual angles of vision. That is the way of devotional service to the Lord. Maharaj?
Yuyudana, Satyaki, same person. Very dear to Krishna and very dear to Arjuna. He was a student of Arjuna in military science. And he was practically on the same level as a fighter as Arjuna. And he was so much appreciated by Lord Krishna that when he went to visit the Kauravas to try to talk him out of the battle of Kurukshetra. He took Satyaki with him alone, and they went. So he was very trusted, and that's the point, that just by being a friend or a well-wisher, a supporter, a servant of Lord Krishna, he became the greatest transcendentalist, above, beyond all the speculators and yogis and renouncers and philosophers and everything else. But just because he gave, he was willing to do whatever the Lord wanted. He was a servant of the Lord. And he fought wonderfully in the Battle of Kurukshetra. He was one of the only ones from the Yadu dynasty, the Yadus. That means the Yadu dynasty means like we were hearing yesterday, the members of the Boja and the different dynasties of the Yadu dynasty. And so he was based in Dwarka with Krishna. But everyone can become a great devotee. No one is restricted, and one can become a wonderful devotee just by doing whatever they can do, whatever service they can render, doing it completely for Krishna, offering that. Then Krishna accepts them. As they surrender to me, Krishna says, I reward them accordingly. So if they give everything to me, whatever they've got, then I give everything to them. I become purchased by them. And that's the highest achievement. That's the highest spiritual perfection, is to be Krishna's. One becomes Krishna's, and Krishna becomes theirs. So that kind of relationship is possible. Satyaki showed that.
Thank you, Maharaj. Om Gyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishdaya Bhutale Srimate Dhanavirga Swami Niti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishdaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Desatarine. I'll put up this picture of Lord Chaitanya. That's the picture on our flyer. We were hearing this in the Lilamrita this morning, how Srila Prabhupada was explaining that the illusions of this material world, worldly connection, the same thing that it's being explained that the sannyasis give up here, these worldly connections, namely family, wife, children, friends, home, wealth, everything, these things that keep people in the illusion of aham mameti, I and mine, thinking that this is all in all. I am this body. Everything that I see related to me is mine, and I'll be with all of these possessions and things forever. But it's called illusion because it's temporary. These things won't last forever. They'll last a very short time, and at least the person who's around them or owning them will last a very short time. Once the time of death comes, people are just kicked away from all these things, their nation, their home, their society, their wife, friends, family, everything they worked for. So these things are called illusion or temporary. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that the renouncers of the world give up all these worldly connections to attain the transcendental bliss of Brahman happiness. But above that is adhokshaja, happiness. He says the empiric philosophers enjoy a transcendental quality of bliss by philosophical speculation on the supreme truth, but beyond that pleasure is the pleasure enjoyed by Brahman in his eternal form of the personality of Godhead. And as Maharaj was saying, Satyaki was so dear to Krishna by being a friend and a supporter and trusted like this. And so one can become very dear to Krishna in that way by being a servant, an assistant. So, and we understand that Krishna, he says, one who claims to be my devotee, he's not my devotee. But one who is a devotee of my devotee, he's my devotee. And we also read so many statements of how Krishna is more pleased when the devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is glorified. So if one can become very dear to Krishna by being his supporter, servant, assistant, and his friend, then what to speak of those who are very dear to his pure devotee, like Srila Prabhupada? Those who are very great servants of Srila Prabhupada that are always sticking by his side as an assistant, a servant, a supporter of Srila Prabhupada. They are called, as we heard this morning, they're renouncing so many illusions for devotional service, so they're called Yatibihi, the great renouncers, or Yatindra, the best of sannyasis. So we see these personalities who stick to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada are able to... What is the result of if we stick close to these personalities? Satyaki was very close to Krishna, and therefore all perfection was there. He was Krishna's supporter, so he achieved the goal of life. So if Krishna is even more merciful to the devotee of his devotee, then what we can see how great is the result of if we stick to these people who are the supporters, well-wishers, servants of the pure devotee of Krishna, Srila Prabhupada. So that's the greatest renunciation. Some yogis want to try to do different austerities, philosophical speculation, and give up material attachment on their own strength. But what happens to them? They fall down. Why is that? Because they haven't taken shelter of the internal potency of the Lord, called the Hladini potency. So if we want to engage in devotional service forevermore, which is our constitutional position as an eternal servant, then we need to take shelter of the internal potency of the Lord. And how is that done? That's done by engaging in his devotional service. So it's not possible to actually preach Krishna consciousness if one is not under the shelter of the internal potency of the Lord. A devotee, someone who is preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world, must be empowered, specifically empowered by the Lord to execute such an activity. So, in order to achieve the goal of life and give that to others, we have to take shelter of the internal potency of the Lord, which means we have to be fully engaged in devotional service. We see this with sometimes when the devotees do book distribution. Things are very difficult, but then when they take full shelter of that service, then things become very nectarian. And an easy way to do that is one devotee was saying this like 3-second rule. It's just that every 3 seconds he has to be speaking to someone, trying trying to give them Srila Prabhupada's books, because they're taking full shelter of the service. And then it's just in Krishna's hands. There's no more interruptions and speculating on, okay, am I going to be able to do this? Can I do this on my own strength? Will I distribute a lot of books? Will they take the books? Will this be a success? There's no more speculation and no more interruption if one takes full shelter of Krishna's service. So they're fully engaged in preaching Krishna consciousness, non-stop, without any interruption. And then things go very nicely. It just brings to mind like that the devotee who distributed, has broken so many records for book distribution, Mahotsav Prabhu. He was explaining how they were, the day when he broke the last record for, I think it was 4,000 something books distributed of Srila Prabhupada's books in one day, he was, or it might have been the one before that, like 3,000 something. Anyway, he was trying to break the record that day, as he says he tries to do every day. And he was distributing Srimad Bhagavatams, and they had just gotten out like, I think like 9 of them or like 12 of them in like the first hour or something like that. And he was trying to get to more than 28 Bhagavatams. So they got out half of that in like the first hour or two, and he was thinking, okay, like piece of cake, here we go, we got this, like I'm gonna do this. He was explaining his thinking at the Sankirtan festival last year. He was explaining that once half of the books went out, the Bhagavatam sets in the first 2 hours or so, he's thinking, okay, I'm gonna do this, you know, like here we go, like on my own strength. He was explaining that he said that he got puffed up. And after that, no books went out for the next like 4 5 hours or something like that. And the temple president is texting him saying, what's going on? Like, are you still out there? Like, what's happening? And he was just thinking like, this is horrible. And he was trying everything. He was thinking like every line, every strategy, everything in the book, thinking, I'm going to do this on my own strength. I got this. And like that, the mercy was stopped. But after all of this struggling for many hours, he was thinking, I can either dishonorably leave the book distribution spot and go back to the temple, or I can at least stick it out, and then I can, you know, say, well, I tried. So he said, and I'm way too puffed up to leave the book distribution spot and go back to the temple. So he kept trying, and he said, once I began to just meditate on the lotus feet of my spiritual master, then everything, it went from, he described it as ox loka, because if someone's giving a lot of money and taking a lot of books, he uses this analogy like a cow giving a lot of milk. And so when no books were going out, he said it was like ox loka for many hours. But then he began to meditate on the lotus feet of his spiritual master and think about how it's only by the mercy of my spiritual master that I can be engaged in this service. And it's only by his potency that this can actually happen. So he took shelter of the internal potency of the Lord, the Hladini potency. And like this, which is none different than the lotus feet of the spiritual master. It's explained in the Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava that one can have darshan of the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani in this lifetime. And how is that? It's explained that by seeing the lotus feet of one's spiritual master, one can eventually realize that those lotus feet, they can see that they're non-different than the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani, the best servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's also the Hladini potency of the Lord. So by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the spiritual master, one is under the internal potency of the Lord, and then everything is nicely arranged. When I was telling His Holiness Dhanavir Goswami about, not telling him, but we were talking about Mahotsav Prabhu breaking that record for like more than 4,000 books distributed in a day, he was saying, Maharaj said, wow, just see the power of a pure desire. He said, if one has a pure desire, the material energy just moves out of the way. So this is what happens. One has a pure desire, meaning they take shelter of the internal potency of the Lord. They take shelter of the lotus feet of the spiritual master, and then the material energy moves to the side. And things that are ordinarily impossible to happen, happen. But that doesn't even make sense. 4,000 books. Like, imagine just picking up 4,000 books and putting them somewhere else. Like, doesn't make any sense. So things that are impossible to happen, happen by the mercy of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada was instructed by his spiritual master that you preach this message of Krishna consciousness in the English language. And if you ever get money, print books. So he took those words from the lotus mouth of his spiritual master as his life and soul. Guru Vakya Parama Mahatva. The instructions of the spiritual master are my life and soul, or my heart. So this was Srila Prabhupada's mood, and when he came to America on the instructions of his spiritual master to try to execute that order, then what happens? The impossible happens. A whole world full of demons turns to a world full of Hare Krishnas. Hare Krishna becomes a household word. There's temples all over the world. Communist regime countries fall, and now religion is allowed in those countries. It used to be so Russia was a communist country. There's no religion. The government is God. There's no God, it's the government. That's the idea. So therefore, Prabhupada always said this communism is so demonic. They're saying there's no God, we are God. They would tell people, you're going to church every day and praying for bread. Are you getting any bread? We should be awake during the Srimad Bhagavatam class. That's the best way to actually take shelter of the internal potency of the Lord. Because by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam regularly, all inauspicious things are removed from the heart. So like this is a good way. Being attentive and awake during our japa and being awake during the Srimad Bhagavatam class are great places to start taking shelter of the Hladini potency of the Lord. So these communists, they would say, you're praying for bread. Are you getting any bread? And when people would tell them no, they would say, okay, just see. What is this so-called God you're praying to? Pray to us for bread. And people would say, please give us bread. And then they give them a whole truck of bread, and they'd see, we're your God. So that's communism. So Srila Prabhupada explains it's so demoniac. But he went to the communist Russia, infiltrated it, met one person, spoke to him for a day, and from that one person, so many devotees were made in Russia, and devotees are doing all these crazy missions to liberate the conditioned souls in that country, sneaking Srila Prabhupada's books into the country, even though they could be imprisoned and beaten and drugged with these crazy drugs that make them crazy in the prisons, and that happened. But so they took on so much suffering out of compassion for the conditioned souls, so much austerity for devotees to be made there. So on that point, one thing is, how many austerities did the previous devotees and previous acharyas go through just so we can take the plate of prasadam that we're taking when we sit down? We would have no idea what prasadam even is if it wasn't for their austerities. So that happened in the communist countries. And in India, previously, if you went there and you had white skin and you're a devotee, they would say, are you from America? And say, yeah. Now if you go there and you look like this, they say, oh, you're from Russia. Because now there's so many devotees made in Russia. It's not a communist country anymore. During the time of the communist regime, there was their main newspaper called, I think, The Communist, or something like that. The main newspaper, it said, there are 5 greatest enemies, 5 biggest dangers to our communist regime here in Russia. And what are those 5? Rock and roll music, American pop culture, or American culture, and number 3, Hare Krishna. And that's the one. Number 3 was third time's the charm. That's the one that took them down, actually, by flooding that country with Srila Prabhupada's books, which are the ripened fruit of love of Godhead that Lord Chaitanya came to give. We see there's that verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's that string of verses in the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya it's explaining how he's the gardener, and he's gardening these these fruits of love of God. He is growing the Chaitanya tree that he also is. So he's growing this Chaitanya tree, and many fruits of love of God are coming from it. And he's explaining that I'm just one person. I can't enjoy all of these fruits myself. So I need others to distribute them far and wide. And what is that fruit of love of God that he came to give? Nigama Kalpatoyor something, that verse in the Bhagavatam, the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's the ripened fruit of the Vedas. So this Srimad Bhagavatam, it's the ripened fruit of love of Godhead that Lord Chaitanya is so anxious to distribute to all the living entities. And we can also experience the highest nectar of distributing that fruit of love of Godhead by giving people this full set of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and by accepting it ourselves, by hearing it attentively, and by reading it every day, and then hearing it every day in the classes, and by living by it. We can taste this fruit of love of God, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and distribute it to others, because that's what Lord Chaitanya came to do. So by distributing these fruits of love of Godhead in the communist country, Russia, we see the whole thing collapsed. And now religion is widely accepted there. There's more devotees there than anywhere else in the world. And people are happy. They're getting the fruit of love of God. So how do we do that? We do that by taking shelter of the Hladini potency of the Lord. And how is that? We take shelter of the great Yatibihis, the great renouncers. It's explained in this verse. Those who have given up everything, all ideas of this so-called material enjoyment, everything that this world has to offer, simply to get the real essence, the best possible thing, which is shelter at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. So by surrendering to those persons and endeavoring to serve them, we can achieve what is durapam, very difficult to achieve, which is this love of God, and we can distribute it to others as Lord Chaitanya came to do. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Prabhu? Jivadoya is asking what the ox thing was. Mahotsa was just, he was comparing when people are giving a lot of money and taking a lot of books, he was comparing them to cows giving a lot of milk. So he was saying when he started thinking, I'll do this on my own strength, then it went from Goloka, which is the world of many cows, to Oxloka. Cows don't give milk. But then when he took shelter of the lotus feet of his guru, then it again became Goloka. And in the very end of the day, the record for book distribution was broken. Yes, Prabhu? Yeah, so the Hladini potency, that is Srimati Radharani, who's the topmost servitor of Lord Krishna himself. And the spiritual master is described as either an expansion of Lord Nityananda or the representative of Srimati Radharani, the topmost servant of Krishna. So that's why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that one can have darshan of the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani by having darshan of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. So it's that's how we take shelter of the internal potency of the Lord. We take shelter of the words emanating from his lotus mouth. And by that, all ignorance is destroyed. All desires are fulfilled. We do the anartha nivritti and anartha pravritti at the same time. All inauspicious things are kicked out. We're giving up all unwanted things. And at the same time, we're getting attachment to the real thing, which is Krishna, the only thing that will make us happy. So we're getting detached from all these material things that won't make us happy and attached to Krishna by submissively hearing the words from the lotus mouth of the bona fide spiritual master. And endeavoring to follow those instructions. We make the instructions of the spiritual master our life and soul, and then everything is possible. There's so many examples, and if you read any of the books that devotees write about their time with Srila Prabhupada, there's so many miraculous examples of what happens when someone takes shelter of the internal potency of the Lord. Okay, thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Gaura Nitai ki jai. Gaura Purnima ki jai.